Joining the show now, we've got a former Bills defensive end, Marcellus Wiley, on with us. He played for the Bills from 1997 to 2000. He played 10 seasons in the NFL for the Bills, the Chargers, the Cowboys, and the Jaguars. He's a former ESPN and Fox Sports analyst and is the current host of the More to It podcast. Also authored a book, Never Shut Up: The Life, Opinions, and Unexpected Adventures of an NFL Outsider. We're going to cover all of that. So, Marcellus, thanks for taking the time to be on with us today in the off season.
Oh, appreciate it. I'm glad to see you guys, man. I haven't been to Orchard Park in a couple of years. Need to get back and see my mafia out there.
Heck yeah. Well, come on back for training camp. Come on back for a game. You know they're going to treat you right. We'll treat you right. We always love our Bills legends, and we love when they come back. Hey, we've been talking about this Bills roster this whole show. What have you thought of the roster the last couple seasons? What do you think of Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane and the job that they have done with this team?
Oh, I love the talent level. Like, the talent level is second to none. They put themselves in position to be contenders every single year, and that's what they're actually going out there and achieving, contention. Everyone knows we went through that gut-wrenching heartache of 13 seconds to go, and I hate to bring up bad memories, but that's also a positive that lets you know how close this team really is. Now, that was a couple of years ago, and I think the loss of Brian Daboll kind of messed with the sophistication of this team, especially the offense, when it comes to how they're going to be able to go plan B football. We know plan A. Josh Allen is here to save the day. But when it comes down to high stakes football, especially in the playoffs, you got to be consistent and you got to have confidence in that plan B. So the Russian attack, obviously, and a balanced attack where everything doesn't come through Josh Allen's efforts is what's necessary this year. We know we could go out there with the talent. We know we have the chemistry. We have the great coaching. But you got to be able to have that dynamic of making sure you can do other things to put yourself in position to succeed.
All right, Marcellus, we're about 3 weeks away from Bills training camp, and it's a lot shorter than it used to be back in your playing days. Our normal host, Steve Tasker, always begrudges these young guns that only have 2 or 3 weeks of training camp.
You guys only have 2 weeks out there. What?
Exactly. Do you have any standout stories, funny stories, or just any way that you can illustrate how more grueling it was in the late 90s and into the 2000s when it was a longer preseason and a longer training camp here with the Bills?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways you could take this. One, you could just look at us and our equipment back then versus now. Like, everything is smaller now. Everything is lighter now. Everything is contoured now. Back when we look at those shoulder pads, they don't make those anymore. Those look like F-150s turning the corner. Like, it's unreal how big and blocky we look. And you think in the moment, and you really are going against the best athletes in the world until you look up 10, 20 years later and realize, oh, the game is just getting faster. They're bigger, they're stronger. And frankly, the game is smarter in terms of how they take care of the players. So, of course, I'm jealous like every other veteran out there whose birth certificate robbed them and didn't allow him to be born a lot later. Because look at Peyton Manning right there. Like, you would never, ever see a quarterback looking like that. Now, they look slim. They look like mannequins in front of Foot Locker. It's a whole different animal. The physicality was different. Some of the things we were allowed to do, Oklahoma drill, that's banned now, outlawed. Like, we didn't use the word concussion. We used the word got my bell rung. We use phrases like that. Coach will look at you and you will self-diagnose your own concussion. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm all right. And that was it. There was no independent evaluator and medical guy on the sideline. So, like anything in this world, it's evolved. It's gotten bigger, faster, smarter, and stronger.
So, Marcellus, if you were in the NFL today, if you were blessed with a birth certificate to play in the NFL today, if you were just in your rookie season right now, what type of player do you think you could be in the NFL today?
Oh, let me be real about this one. One, I wouldn't be here as you see me now. I would drop 30, 40 pounds immediately because I was like the last era of the big defensive
Yeah.
ends.
Yeah.
And they were saying, oh, you got to be 280 or so and play the run. I would be 98 pounds and fast and quick as lightning. I'll be out there so little. I would do it that way in terms of physicality. Also, I would respect that these guys are so talented. Like, it's not that a Bruce Smith still wouldn't be a Bruce Smith in this era. It's the mid pack that just has a higher talent level, higher talent ceiling than it did in the generation before. That's just what happens every generation. The mid tier, the meat of the NFL, most guys, they just take another step forward. I think I would go out there with a different approach. I wouldn't have been in the weight room as much. I was a big old strong, quick, but not the fastest guy. I would have put a lot more emphasis on being smaller, lighter, quicker, and more dynamic because that's where the game is right now. So I don't know if I would have the same level of success, but I certainly went out there and died trying.
All right, going from one big defensive end to another one currently on the Bills, Gregory Rousseau, early in your career, you improved your sack number in each of your first 5 seasons. Gregory Rousseau, the Bills' first-round pick in 2021, went from 4 sacks to 8 sacks last season. What did you do coming out of Columbia, being a second-round pick? Specifically, was it adding more strength? Was it your pass rush moves? Was it more film of the offensive tackles that helped you just continue to have that upward angle to your career that you think could be something that Gregory Rousseau can take into year 3 in Buffalo?
Yeah, I think it starts with just between the ears and the confidence, the repetitions of seeing it at this level. Once you start to see it at this level and get familiar and get comfortable with it, you can address it differently and you start to really show who you are, how great you are, because there's this trepidation, reservation when you first get out there. You know, it's just your first time in a new experience. As great as you were in college, this is a whole different animal. People have man strength out there, right? They got families to feed, so they are going out there to another degree of intensity. So you got to get used to that. Another thing is you got to like step up in terms of the violence with your hands. I came out of Columbia, so I was a little green, not only in technique, but also the violence necessary to be successful. And then you go and you practice with a Bruce Smith, you practice with a Phil Hansen, and you start to realize, oh, I need to step this up. But that doesn't happen overnight because you're used to what you're used to. You have your own work habits that now need to be improved. And beyond that, with the confidence matching the new technique and the new respect you have for your opponents, you go out there, and I always tell people they forget this, that over time, literally the NFL turns into either A, guys you've already played against in college and had success against, or B, guys you didn't play against who are younger than you that you can now take advantage of because you just graduated from where they are. So that's it. It's like just stay the course, persevere, work on your technique, and believe in what you're doing.
I love that point. Former Bills defensive end Marcellus Wiley is on with us. And let's stay on the defensive line because this team could have a mean defensive line this season. I mean, they've got Von Miller, who's coming back from that knee injury. You've got Greg Rousseau going into year 3. He had 8 sacks last season. They signed Leonard Floyd this offseason. I could not believe that happened. I was like, we signed Leonard Floyd? Yes. And then you've got Ed Oliver, who's going into his 5th season as he just signed a new contract, some insurance in the middle there of your defensive line. What do you think this group could be capable of this season?
Oh, special group because there are special names a part of that group. I was a part of the #1 defense when I played in Buffalo. Wade Phillips as our D coordinator, Wade Phillips as our head coach, and Ted Cottrell as our defensive coordinator. And as much as you can look at the coaching and as much as you can sit there and say it's about the jockey, it's about the horses. And you got the horses. You got the guys who can go out there and get it, win those one-on-one matchups. Also, trusting each other. And there's an unspoken language when you play on the defensive line. And that's coming from the chemistry you're able to build where you can look at someone and he knows that you're going to pin the guard so he can loop around. He knows that you're going to go out there and pick the tackle so he can come inside. Those type of things is where you have special plays on top of just special talent. So I look forward to this team just gelling together. And we all know it starts up front. It sounds cliche, but it's the truth. If you're able to dictate terms at the line of scrimmage, not only are you able to now control where the ball goes, but more importantly, intimidate your opponent. No one's going to quit. No one's going to tap out, but you're going to have your way. And when I saw Bruce Smith going around one corner, Ted Washington up the middle, Phil Hansen around the other corner, myself at times, man, you were able to go out there and control tempo and take advantage of opponents.
Yeah, so from those early years in Buffalo, you mentioned you learned from Bruce Smith and Phil Hansen that really you had to be more violent than you originally thought with your hands. What else did you learn from them? And this is kind of tying back to Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Boogie Basham, some of those younger pieces that have Von Miller that they can bounce ideas off of. Did you learn a lot in terms of what pass rush moves work, when to use them, when not to, from a legendary player like Bruce Smith and a very underrated player in Phil Hansen?
Oh, absolutely. You get to borrow from their genius. Phil Hansen was a technician. Bruce Smith was a special player and a specialist. Like, he was surgical out there. I've never seen somebody get so many sacks, and they tried to block him, but he remained untouched. He was so surgical with his hand swipe. He was so good in knowing the steps, the approach angles, knowing when to set you up, how to set you up, and when to unleash the big gun of weapons that he had. Like, Bruce was just next level. He would take off, go straight up the field. Then he would make you kick out harder because he's so quick and fast. And then he'll hit you with the spin move. Oh, now you're anticipating the spin move. Then he'll come back with a counter. It was just like watching a genius at work. But the key to it all is not what's surrounding you. It's what you can take from it and add to what you do. And I think that's the maturation process. It takes time to bake a Bruce Smith spin move into your game plan, and frankly, into your physical skill set. Because I used to watch Bruce spin all the time, and I'll sit there, I'll squint, I say, all right, my turn. And it didn't look the same. But you got to get those reps in there, and you start to realize, like, I used to spin, and I wouldn't spin with my elbow wide. And then Bruce finally said, hey, man, you're too skinny on your spin. Like, you got to hook them, and you got to get around them. Little things like that. I remember I couldn't get off the ball as fast as Bruce Smith. And he was an old man. I was like, dude, I'm young, quick, and fast. And Bruce is beating me off the ball. And finally I asked him, Bruce, why you get off the ball faster than everybody? He said, what are you looking at? I said, the ball. He said, what part of the ball? And my head said, kaboom. What do you mean, what part of the ball? He said, I look at the bottom tip and the pinky. And from that moment on, I start looking at that same part of the ball, and I started to get off the ball as fast as Bruce Smith.
I love that. You got to play with some greats. Are there any memories that stick out in your mind as games, as conversations, seasons that you'll never forget?
I would never forget the first phone call. Would you like to be a Buffalo Bill? And it was Marv Levy. I'm like, that's Marv Levy. And I won't forget walking into the stadium, just seeing it so many times on television. I won't forget that I walked into a locker room and saw the locker placards of Thomas, Reed, and Smith, like in one sight line. I couldn't believe that. Shaking hands with Jim Kelly, who just retired, and was like, that's Jim Kelly. Playing in the Music City Miracle and never crying that hard over a loss before or after that moment. That was just the most gut-wrenching loss ever. I just remember the fans being so crazy, so into it, that they would tailgate on a Wednesday for a Sunday game. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, why are there RVs in the parking lot? They're like, they're here for the game. I said, dude, have they checked the calendar? It's Wednesday. And they just all be in. So I'm so glad I got drafted there. It was like a big time college town because everything was Buffalo Bills.
What can you tell us about your podcast, just for us and for your listeners? Like, what do you get listening to your podcast more to it?
Yeah, you get the intersection of life and sports. I just learned so much from the game of football and from being an athlete. And I think a lot of things gets lost in translation. So with every story, I think there's a greater life lesson. Watching a game of football, you may think it's just a bunch of guys running around 300 pounds, knocking each other out. But there's a chess match at play. There's a battle over acreage, right? Like I'm trying to move another man against his will by using my skill. That's hard to do. But who communicates that? We see the results, but do we know the process? So you listen to more to it, you realize, wow, there's so much more to everything that I think is so simple. So I like to take the fans there because they weren't privy to having those experiences. So we share in those experiences.
Very interesting.
And we know that you have a book out as well. It's been out for some time. Never Shut Up, The Life, Opinions, and Unexpected Adventures of an NFL Outlier. We want to plug that as well. So tell us about the book.
Yes, the book is a journey from my humble beginnings in Compton, California, to being that little curious kid in class who was just a bona fide nerd from Hello, and I embraced it. I loved it. I was so intellectually curious from Hello. And I was also the fastest kid in the neighborhood, fastest kid at school who found his way onto a football field and found his passion, found his love, but never gave up on one to serve the other. So I go to Columbia University, still able to play football, but also get a great education as well. And there was a time where people said I wouldn't be able to make it to the NFL. There was a time that people said I wouldn't make it out of Compton, etc. And that book just takes you through that journey and through all the life lessons that I learned of believing in yourself and persevering and making your dreams a reality. You don't have to rob one to pay the other. So that's what Never Shut Up really means. It's about you telling the world exactly who you are and exactly what you want, and never stop in that conversation. Never shut up.
We love that. Thank you so much for joining us today, Marcellus. We appreciate the time. We appreciate hearing some of your stories and hearing your take on this Bills defensive line and roster this season. We hope you have a great rest of your summer.
Oh, have a great one. Appreciate you guys. And this is our year, baby. Let's get
I
over
love
the hump.
it.
Oh,
I
man,
love
I
it.
can't wait to see it. Go get it, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Marcellus. That was Marcellus Wiley, a former Bills defensive end sports analyst. He was a second-round pick Bills out of the 1997 draft. Played with the Bills from 1997 to 2000, then played with the Chargers, the Cowboys, and the Jaguars.